What if I told you that in the middle of one of the biggest NRL clashes of the season, a coach's life nearly slipped away? That while the Broncos were tearing through the Raiders with ruthless precision, something shocking and unthinkable was unfolding just meters from a sideline. Strap in, because this isn't just about rugby league. This is about survival, heartbreak, and the fight to keep a dream alive. The stadium was roaring, the Broncos were in control, and Raiders fans could feel the dread sinking in. The green machine was falling apart, try after try, the scoreline tilting heavily in Brisbane's favour. But then, whispers started circulating. Eyes shifted from the field to the sideline. Something was wrong. The Raiders head coach, the man tasked with steering this proud club into the finals, clutched his chest. His face pale. Staff rushed to his side. For a moment, rugby league didn't matter. This was life and death. And yet, the game kept going. The Broncos showed no mercy. Ezra Mam slicing through defenders, Reece Walsh dazzling with speed, and Adam Reynolds pulling the strings with masterful control. Canberra's defensive line cracked again and again, as if mirroring the coach's faltering heartbeat. But here's the twist. While medics swarmed around the coach, the Raiders players didn't stop. In fact, something shifted. That sense of urgency, the desperation to fight for their leader, began to ignite. And what happened next stunned the entire crowd. But before I tell you how the Raiders responded to their coach's collapse, let's rewind a bit, because this story is about more than just one game. It's about pressure, passion, and the brutal reality of rugby league at the highest level. The Raiders had come into this clash knowing the stakes. Finals hopes on the line. Critics already circling. Every mistake magnified. And in the days leading up, insiders whispered about the pressure mounting on the coach. The Broncos weren't just another opponent. They were a machine in full flight, the most dangerous team in the comp. Coaching against Brisbane meant every tactical error would be punished. Every lapse in defence would be exposed. And as the tries piled on, the pressure didn't just sit on the players' shoulders, it squeezed tighter and tighter around the coach himself. Imagine the feeling, 20,000 fans roaring, commentators dissecting every choice, and your team falling apart while you're powerless on the sideline. It's enough to push anyone to the brink. Brisbane smelled blood. From the opening minutes, they weren't just playing to win, they were playing to humiliate. Payne Haas bulldozed through the middle, Patrick Carrigan set the tempo, and Walsh lit up the edges with sheer brilliance. One particular try had the stadium gasping. Walsh, with a step so sharp it cut through 3 defenders, flying under the posts. The Broncos fans erupted, while Raiders supporters slumped in silence. The scoreboard was brutal, but as it ticked over, the real drama was brewing just meters away on the sideline. Those closest to the Raiders bench saw it first. The coach shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Then he stood, tried to wave directions to his players, but his hand trembled. Moments later, his knees buckled. Staff caught him before he hit the ground. The crowd didn't notice at first, but those near the sideline did, and panic rippled through the Raiders camp. "Call the medics," someone yelled. Within seconds, trainers sprinted over, and paramedics pushed through. Oxygen, monitors, urgency. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was serious. And yet, the camera stayed focused on the Broncos as they scored again. The contrast was chilling. On one side, a team celebrating dominance. On the other, a coach fighting for breath. Here's where the story took a turn. With their coach receiving treatment on the sideline, the Raiders players finally snapped out of their daze. You could see it in their eyes, the fire returning. One said after the incident, Canberra charged upfield with a level of aggression they'd been missing all night. Jack Whiten put his body on the line, Joseph Tarpany smashed through defenders, and Jordan Rapana threw himself into every contest. The crowd began to realise what was happening. The Raiders weren't just playing for pride anymore, they were playing for their coach's life. And then, the moment that sent chills through the stadium. A break down the left wing, Seb Chris sprinting with defenders chasing, diving into the corner. Try time. Raiders fans erupted, players pointing to the sideline. That one was for him. But would it be enough to turn the tide? Or would the Broncos' juggernaut roll right over them again? Because as much as the Raiders were lifting, the Broncos weren't about to ease off. And what happened in the second half was even more dramatic, both on and off the field. Stick with me, because the twists are only just beginning. If you're hooked on this story and want to know how the Raiders battled on while their coach's life hung in the balance, don't go anywhere. And hey, Before we dive into the explosive second half, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now to stay across every twist, every shock, and every moment in the NRL. This is Aussie NRL Updates, and we've got you covered. In the first half, the Broncos tore the Raiders to pieces, the scoreboard blowing out, and then the unthinkable happened. The Raiders coach suffered a heart failure scare right there on the sideline. His players rallied with one emotional try, but the question remained, could they really fight back against the most dangerous team in the league while their leader fought for his life? As the teams ran back out, tension hung over the ground like a storm cloud. The Broncos were smiling, confident, ready to put the game to bed. But the Raiders? Their faces told a different story. Grit. Determination. They weren't just playing rugby league anymore, they were playing for someone they loved. The opening sets were brutal. Canberra flew off the line in defence, hitting harder than they had all game. Brisbane looked rattled. Suddenly, the Raiders had belief. But then, the Broncos struck again. Ezra Mam, electric as ever, darted through a gap and left defenders clutching air. Under the posts. Another try. The Broncos fans roared. The scoreline looked like it would blow out again. And just when it seemed over, the Raiders responded.